Hey everybody, welcome to the Badgerland Birding Podcast. I'm Derek, this is Ryan. We are bringing you bird and birding news from the Badger State and beyond. So in our first episode here, super excited to be talking with everybody today and for the launching of the podcast. We just wanted to go through a little bit about ourselves, kind of how we got started with all this, how we got into birding, kind of go from there. We'd love to have some guests on, talk about different things, birding in different states, have some experts talk about their ways they excel in their field and tips and tricks for beginners and more advanced birders as well.
Yeah, so the kind of plan here is we're going to try to record one of these weekly, I think we said, right? We were going weekly on these. Yep. So we're going to record one of these a week. And what we really want to do is just provide some interesting stuff for everybody about the world of birding, stuff that we're doing, stuff that our guests are doing, because we've met a lot of really interesting people that we're really excited to have on and talk about just some of the different things they're doing scientifically or culturally or just whatever they have going on there. So we're going to actually post the video version of these on our YouTube Shorts channel, and then we're going to have the podcast available on all of the regular podcasting platforms. And stay tuned because we're going to be doing some cool stuff. But like Derek said, today we want to talk about how we got here in the first place and kind of what we have in the works going forward.
Yeah, and I think touching a little bit about kind of having the guests on is I feel like a lot of the cool conversations we had are just like people we've met out birding. Be like, this is a cool person. You have a really cool conversation. You're like, I think other people would probably enjoy hearing them talk about this as well. And I think a lot of those people, they're not necessarily like the leading expert in a field. They're just really good at what they do, or they're really good at birding and they're reading.
Well, that's kind of how you become a leading expert.
It's how you
there's
become
a guy,
there's
a woman we talk about sometimes who became like the leading expert on house sparrows because she just had them in her yard and she watched them and put like tons of hours in watching house sparrows, and then that's how you become an expert. So
yeah, it's true. So I kind of feel like those people are like hidden gems where maybe they're not on a lot of the birding podcasts, but they're super informative. They have a lot of good tips as well. And we really want to keep this fun and have it be an engaging thing. So going on about how we started birding, for those of you that know us, it was actually because we watched a specific birding movie that many of you might be.
I think we should do like a flashback to the year 2016 or whatever.
All right,
it was.
take it away.
I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I do remember that we were sitting in our living room at our parents' house, and from the other room, my mom, well, I guess our mom,
don't count me out here.
Brother from another mother, but not actually. Our mom calls from the other room and is like, "Hey guys, there's a movie on about birds if you want to watch it." And we're just like, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd like to watch something about birds." And then she DVR'd it, I think. And it happened to be the big year with Owen Wilson, Jack Black, and Steve Martin. And a lot of the people out there listening have probably seen that movie already. But if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it because it's a really feel-good comedy that actually, if you're into birding, really hits on a lot of the things that you do when you're a birder, like feeder stakeouts and rarity chases and kind of seeing the same people at different rare birds throughout the year. So it's really I'd say not always spot on, but most of the time spot on. It's the best birding movie that they make.
Yeah, and it's a really heartwarming one too. Like anytime we watch the big year, I feel really excited to go out and look for stuff. Like it's just something that always makes me excited about what we can see next and kind of going out and doing birding. And that's kind of how it inspired us because we'd always been into nature and birds and stuff growing up, but it was more like, oh, really, like
fish a lot.
You would see a bird and you just be like, oh man, like a Baltimore Oriole, like that's amazing. Like you didn't know necessarily when they were going to be here. Like kind of we have that information now, but at the time you're just like, holy cow, look at that cool looking bird.
So I actually remember going out with like a disposable camera and taking pictures of birds, and they like obviously turned out terrible because it was a disposable camera, but I just remember for some reason like having the desire to take pictures of them.
So that was at a young age, I guess.
Apparently, yeah. I don't really know why. I mean, I took pictures of all sorts of other random stuff too, but
yeah. And just kind of adding on to that, we would watch birds at our grandparents' house because they had this really awesome big like sliding door window, and my grandpa would feed the birds and we'd mark down in the little blue Birds of Wisconsin stand tequila guide like, oh, the nuthatch is here today. And there would always be the ones you would see, and then the ones that are like slightly more rare that would be like the nuthatch.
The red-breasted nuthatch was the one that we now know they're an eruptive species, so right? Sometimes they'd be there and sometimes they wouldn't,
but at the time it's just like, that one's different, I don't see that one all the time,
right? I remember we'd go kind of through the seasons too. Like it was always, oh, there's the junco. That means winter's on the way. And then, oh, the junco's gone. That means we're going to be able to wear a t-shirt soon. So yes, there was a lot of things early on in that backyard that kind of I don't know what word I want
spurred
to use
on
here.
kind of that.
Gave us the baseline of interest in bird
Sure, and
culture.
I do really credit our grandparents and parents for kind of fostering that love of nature. I continued on, got a biology degree, and then I actually got my master's in marine biology. So I've actually been more in like the fish world than the bird world. Which if you are follow our stuff or kind of are familiar on Twitter, there's like a birds versus fish feud. It's like all in good fun, but kind of like your team bird or team fish. But I like to be a little bit on both sides of that argument.
Can't do that.
That's where I am. So
I went on to get my communications and business degree, which in no way is related to birds, but I had to do like dozens of presentations, which helped me get over my crippling fear of public speaking.
that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
So basically, after watching the big year, we were kind of like, oh, that seems like doing a big year. Like you could do it in a state. For those that are super unfamiliar, the term like a big year is trying to see as many birds as possible in the United States in a calendar year, but you can do one for like a state or a county. So you can kind of make it as big or small as you want. And we were like, that looks really fun. I can't believe people actually do this. So
I was under the impression that hardly anyone birded. I was like under the impression that like somebody out there probably did it, but didn't take it very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of the sort of person that likes to be competitive. And I'm like,
No.
whatever it is, I want to like excel at it and win at it. And I was like, maybe there's an unoccupied niche here that's an opportunity to win the state big year because maybe no one's ever done it. I was like, I could set an easy record, going out there. So we decided.
Needless to say, we had like zero experience at the time of ever going out and doing this.
So we decided that we were going to find out what the big year winner for the state of Wisconsin was, which I, at the time, having no knowledge of like birding as a hobby or like big year totals or how many birds even were in the state. I think I emailed some organization, which I think was the Wisconsin Society.
I think it was the WSO.
And they were like, yes, here's the record holder. And the total was like well over 350, I think. And so I was like, ooh, we're probably not going to we're not going to get there, I don't think.
Yeah, and that first year, it was really exciting because everything we were kind of seeing and learning about was new. And there's something special about when you're kind of keeping track of everything where it's like, this bird is new for me. This is something I've never seen before. When you're seeing a bird for the first time, we learned people call it a lifer, as in like it's the first time in your life that you've ever seen it.
Do you feel like you toss these terms around now? You're just like, yeah, lifer, big years.
I do. And then I think, to someone who's not familiar with that stuff, it probably just sounds really ridiculous.
Pretentious.
I don't know about pretentious, but it's just kind of like a lot of terminology to throw around. But anyways, it was definitely like a year of exploration, and we learned a lot doing it because we thought if you just went in the field guide and it said, oh, this bird's here in the winter, that you could just go out in the winter anywhere where the range map said it would be and that you would find it. And we were totally wrong about that. We spent a lot of time in like the forest.
The South Kettle Moraine State Forest.
Yeah, we just thought if you went out to the forest, we're like, that's where the birds are. And it's like the dead of winter, so it's absolutely like nothing.
We have to pause for a second though, because first of all, we decided to do a big year.
Wisconsin big year.
It didn't go that well. But I remember one of the things about it was on the first of the year, I don't think that I went out and I don't think Derek went out, which like now we always go out on the first of the year to try and see the like total we can get. But that first time we didn't. And I remember I found Derek's like journal and it was like, I can't believe I didn't go out on the first of the year. It set me back for this entire year now. And like this was devastating to him in retrospect. It was like
it was. It's still to this day, I can't believe that I didn't go out on the first.
But I do remember we went out and kind of were practicing things, and we did find a regional rarity red-shouldered hawk, which was cool. And at the time, like right now, I would still be excited if we found a red-shouldered hawk.
It's a good bird for the state.
But at the time, we had no idea what it was, and so we took pictures of it and took it to like our local nature center.
Yeah,
our friend Larry
Cash.
He was a head naturalist, I think, at Retzer Nature Center, and he like went through the identification for it, and he was like, "Yep, looks like you got a red-shouldered hawk there," and that was the first rare bird we found.
Yeah, we didn't really understand that it was something you wouldn't really see, and so we reported it on eBird, and they kind of like gave you some flack.
Well,
for
it's funny
we had a
because
picture though.
I know the eBird reviewer now, and like obviously that was the first thing we ever put on eBird, and she emailed me and she was like, now if you didn't see it, you can just be honest and say you didn't see it. She's like, red shoulder hawk's rare, and if you didn't see it, then just leave it off the list. And I emailed back the picture. I was like, bam, and she's like, well, why didn't you just put that on the list to begin with? And I was like, okay, fine. I didn't know how any of it worked though, but then later on we ended up birding together, and she was very nice and helpful. So
yeah, it was a lot of learning, but a lot of cool, exciting things. Like there's a bunch of sea ducks that come in the winter to like Lake Michigan and other water bodies, and seeing there's a bird called a common goldeneye that has a very striking black and white. We saw it at one of the local kind of waterways, and that was like mind blowing to us. We're like, there's this crazy duck we've never seen, and like we didn't know if it was, you know, rare to see one. Turns out if you go to Lake Michigan in the winter, you can see literally thousands of them all over. But at the time it was like, this one bird that we saw is incredible, and it still is really cool to see.
Well, it's funny because we just never paid attention really before.
Yeah, like they had
we didn't know
there.
where to go, and we didn't pay attention to that stuff as much. So I think we went down there and we saw like 4 or 5 or 6 different duck species that we saw a hooded merganser down there we'd never seen before, and then the common goldeneye, and there was like I think an American black duck along with the mallard. So we're just like, whoa, this is crazy! Like what an insane thing that we saw these birds.
Yeah, and once you start paying attention to that stuff, you're like, oh, they're not all mallards, or they're not all just sparrows.
Yeah, I remember I didn't realize that in the winter we had American tree sparrows. So I think that like that first year I was like, wait, that doesn't look like a house sparrow. So there was just this whole new world of paying attention to birds that opened up to us. But just thinking about where we were then versus now, thinking about the excitement level of that first year, that really like spurred us on. And
yeah, and you definitely still get that excitement, but it's kind of in different ways. Like definitely if you go to a new country, it's kind of that same thing over again. We're like, what is this crazy bird in Costa Rica that I'm looking at? Or like the Pacific Northwest. You still can get that excitement, but also just looking at common birds, like seeing new behaviors, being like, oh, I've never seen this bird do this before. Like there's always something to learn, even if you're just looking kind of at the stuff in your own backyard.
Well, I don't know about you, but for me, if I like don't see a bird for a while and then see it again, it almost feels like it's a re-lifer. So the other day we saw the gray crown rosy finch, and that was one that's only the second time I've seen one because they're not very common in this part of the country, obviously. And even though we've traveled a lot, we haven't gone to places where they're very common the time of year we've been there. So it was like a cool experience to go up Devil's Lake to this big bluff and see this rare bird there. And it was very exciting to see that one. And I felt like it was a lifer again. So kind of went full circle. Like it's been long enough since I haven't seen this that now I want to see it again.
Yeah,
excited.
And you can always appreciate different things like the second or third time or fourth time you're seeing something. Like because when we saw it at first, it was kind of there's like, this is a new bird I've never seen, and let me get as many pictures as possible. But then watching it this time, we were taking more videos and spending more care of like, oh, look at the way it's foraging on seeds. Look at how chunky it is compared to the other birds nearby, and the behavioral things.
One thing that used to happen to me way more often than it does now is stuff would show up in the state that I literally didn't know that it was a thing. Like I remember the first time gray crown rosy finch showed up, I was like, what is a gray crown rosy finch? You know?
It's always exciting when a bird there's like different alerts you can find and like chat groups and things where people post rare birds showing up, but sometimes there are still species in the US that pop up and I'm like, I've never heard of that before.
Well, that was kind of flame colored tanager this year. I was because I've not done a lot of birding in, you know, the South America, Central America, Mexico. So
yeah, and that was like basically a southeast Arizona bird south of that showing up in Wisconsin, which was wild.
Made a lot of news actually.
Yeah, it was like, I'm pretty sure it was national news.
I think so as well.
That was crazy. Wisconsin's had a lot of crazy birds this year. It's been a good year for rare birds in the state. But kind of going back to how we started, I feel like over time, like there wasn't like a moment I was like, oh, I'm a much better birder now. It just kind of slowly you accumulate more knowledge over time and you get better at birding by ear and you're more familiar with things.
Well, there was one moment for me when I was like, this has solidified that I really want to continue doing this in the long run. And it was another one of those birds I didn't know that it was a thing, was the Townsend solitaire, which they have a migratory range that actually kind of is supposed to a degree go through the Midwest. Like they always show up for the most part. But I remember going back to Devil's Lake, which we just were for the gray crown rosy finch. They live on the side of these big bluffs there, and you have to hike up Devil's Lake to go to the spot where you see them. And it's kind of like a little mini journey. And we were hiking up there together, And because Derek and I, for that first year, did basically every birding trip together, and we still do tons of birding trips together. But we were up there together. Derek was the only one that had a camera, so he would
Yeah,
he would take the pictures, and I would like point at it and be like, "There it is. Did you get it?" Like it was all on him to get a picture of it. And then I remember if you wouldn't get a picture of it, it'd be like, "What are you doing? Come on!"
I remember we spent at least like a solid 30 minutes trying to get a golden crown kinglet photo.
Because we want documentation of every
Yeah, we
bird
needed like a picture of any bird we saw. But I forgot you didn't have a camera.
Yeah,
that was probably a ridiculous sight of you just pointing at things and me trying to take pictures.
Yeah, I mean, I did do a good job of making sure you knew where it was. I'd be like, "Oh, and move right.
That's true. Move left." Yeah, it was kind of like a spotter and photographer.
Exactly. But anyway, we climbed up that bluff.
Just to clarify, Ryan has his own camera now, so we are not doing the one-man photography show.
Anyway, we climb up the bluff. There's little sprinkles of snow that are coming down, just these tiniest little flurries. It's a clear day. The sun is shining, and we're just up there trying to find this bird in this vast expanse, looking out over the bluff and all these junipers. And then that bird just swoops up and lands on the, not necessarily the top, but like on a branch that we could see. And Derek snapped this picture of it where it's like looking to the side, but his back is turned, and you see the little flecks of sunlight reflecting off of these snowflakes. And we just put in all this effort. It was like a 2-hour drive and then this hike up the bluff. And then we're rewarded with this fleeting sight of a bird that I didn't know existed before I got into birding.
Yeah, that was definitely an iconic trip. And even going back to Devil's Lake or looking for Townsend solitaires, it's definitely one of the things you have to put the effort in. And that was another big thing we learned, is that birding is kind of like, I think of it as like the world's greatest scavenger hunt, because in order to find all these different birds, you have to really know about the habitat. You have to know where they would be at a particular season. You have to do the right things to find them. So it really is testing your skills as like a finder of different things. Like you really have to put in the work if you're doing it alone. You know, if you hire a guide, that might be a different story. Like they're able to do that research and they'll take you along. But to kind of put in the work and then get the reward, I think is a really cool part of birding.
I think too, I always bring this up, I think we were kind of primed to be birders because Pokemon was so big when we were kids.
I would agree.
Because Pokemon is kind of the same as birding. It was like you played the games, and there was a TV show. It was like Game Boy game was probably one of the more popular things. I had a card game, but the idea of it was you went around and you tried to catch and collect different Pokemon, which were basically just like animals. And so that idea of going out and having adventures and collecting some wild animal is very similar to birding, because you, instead of actually taking it, well, hopefully not taking it, but there's falconers. You take the memory and you take the photo and you count it on your list. So it was very similar to Pokemon. And I think that primed a lot of people in our generation to be like, this is probably the most similar thing to this thing that I loved when I was a kid, you know?
And I feel like the main reason more people don't do it is they don't know what it actually is. I think it still has this stigma of kind of being like, that's what my grandparents do, or like, that's what retired people do, or it's kind of this boring hobby that
I do think it's hard to break into the community if you don't know where to go to get into it. You know, like if somebody just decides like, I want to go birding, you know, maybe they're going to contact like a local bird club or like an organization.
But I do feel like with social media and stuff, it's becoming more accessible, where people can see just kind of everyday people going on and be like, look at this cool bird. That's like, I think more people are kind of getting on board, like, hey, this is really cool. And apparently in the UK, birding is like very popular.
Well, we know in the Netherlands it apparently is, because our friend Arjen, who holds the world record for the most birds seen in a calendar year globally, has a huge following now and does all sorts of things in the Netherlands.
Yeah, so like even apart from the US, there's big birding stuff going on elsewhere in the globe. But moving on kind of through that first years, we found birding to be this really cool thing. And so that's what started us. We started wanting to show people that it wasn't what people thought it was. It was actually this really fun adventure. And so that's why we started our YouTube channel, Badgerland Birding. A little kind of plug to our home state of Wisconsin, even though we do go elsewhere and travel and make videos out of the country in different states. But we made our first episode looking for a king eider in Milwaukee, which we actually just celebrated our 7-year anniversary of us being a channel, which was neat. But we go back and watch that first video. It is very hard to watch because...
Well, we definitely didn't know what we were doing at all. We were just like, let's film it and let's put it together and try to edit this thing. I had a blast editing the first one.
Yeah, it was super fun because we were just like, well, let's shoot some film and then we'll do like, we can put voiceover on it. We were trying to figure out like how do we do voiceover on this? Like, what should it be like?
I remember because I am always a little congested. Like with allergies and stuff, I took so much nasal spray to try and clear my nose out because I was like, I have to enunciate and everything, and it sounds so weird because like I just took so much nasal spray to do the voiceover.
It's definitely the enthusiasm, isn't there? Like if you go back and watch that first video, it's like, the king eider is found in Milwaukee.
This is a king eider. It was the first time we had ever seen one. I feel like I'm Severus Snape.
You are Severus Snape.
Harry Potter. You didn't expect to see the eider, did you?
But even kind of the intro song is like very sloppily kind of just played, and like, I mean, I think we have published over 420 videos since then. Was like kind of the count that I remember last time I looked. But just the quality of doing it so many times, I think, has made us better narrators and better storytellers. Now we know more about what to kind of get in the field. But if you go back and watch that first one and then watch like the latest one, it's just like a night and day difference of the quality of it, which I'm glad. I would be worried if it was exactly the same as
there's some other ones like in the first year that we made some interesting editing choices where I was watching and I was like, I don't know why I included that. Like there's just random lines, like it'll be a bird and I'll cut to one of our friends being like, I drank so much cough syrup today, and I'm just like, why was that in there?
There is an early episode about looking for Townsend solitaires, though.
There is,
yeah. So if you want to kind of see the Townsend solitaire experience, you can go back and watch that one. But since then, it's just been such a journey of making videos, and we do tours and walks and presentations and stuff like that, and we do see an impact of people being like, oh, I watch your stuff all the time, and it inspired me to do this or that, and that's really encouraging for what we do now, and to continue wanting to do it and kind of foster that community of people that love birds and bird watching in what we consider a really fun way.
Yeah, I think we always have that desire to build a community like that too, because sometimes it can feel like some of the places that you go for a community in the birding world are a little bit gated. So we always try to invite anybody that's interested to come, hang out in our community, basically, where, we were beginners at some point and we still make mistakes and mis-ID things from time to time, and,
appreciate all the input from other people being like, oh, I think this is actually this. It's like, yeah, you're right.
You might be right about that. So, and just always trying to learn.
Everybody's constantly learning too, because even like the best birders, I've seen make mistakes out in the field, or like get an ID wrong or get a call wrong or something, and it definitely happens. But when you do that community aspect, it's nice to have other people to kind of, help catch those things and make sure like the data is as clean as possible in that way. But I think for a lot of people, it can be kind of daunting to get into something like birding, because there is like a lot of scientific jargon and different terms and things that can kind of be like just go over your head, even with like picking gear and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
it can be kind of complicated and hard to know where to start. And so I think just starting kind of with what you have, like if you have an old pair of binoculars, you don't even necessarily need binoculars, but I think binoculars or a camera make it more fun. But just kind of like, get going on whatever you have with you and see if you enjoy it, and then you can invest more in it later on.
I think it's really fun too to go with somebody that knows more than you, or is more excited than you. Because we like tried to ask anybody who we would encounter in the field where they seemed to have more knowledge than us. We'd be like, hey, would you go birding with us? And some people definitely did. We met more people along the way that they would give us bits of information. And it's funny to still now be with people that, I don't want to say know less, but like have less experience, but they're really excited. So it's like going to see all this stuff for the first time again.
It's kind of like I don't know what to it's kind of like a senior in high school versus a freshman, where it's kind of like where I feel like we were the freshmen. We're like, hey, can you show us like where the lockers are? And now we can kind of be like,
can you show us how to identify an Iceland gull?
Yeah, and we can kind of be like, don't buy that elevator pass. You don't need that. You can do this on your own, to kind of like take people along and have them see the excitement. Because definitely when you're on a tour and you see someone see a bird for the first time that they really wanted to, like, that's such a great feeling. Yeah, we took one of our friends. Well, I guess he wasn't our friend at the time. He just reached out to us about tours, but he came out and did a snowy owl tour, and that was like his his grail bird, he called it. So we went out and we got him a snowy owl, and he was like so jacked about it. And I mean,
we found him a bunch of other like.
It was a really great tour.
Yeah.
Like, we had a really good success rate of what we were looking for.
It was for the most part like, let's go get that. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's get that. Well, there's that one. Okay, now let's get this, and then it would be just one after the next, knocking him down. But when he saw that snowy owl, he got so excited. And we did another snowy owl tour, actually with a couple who really wanted to see one. And we spent almost an entire day driving around this small town where there was a snowy owl reported, because it was one of the most reliable ones in the state at the time that was in the area.
Before we went.
Yes, before we went. When we went there that day, it was not. And then Derek actually went back out with them and was able to get it.
Yeah,
and
that was.
How excited were they when they got?
They were pumped, and I think it made a difference that we put in so much time the day before. But Ryan and I both agreed, we're like, we got to get them a snowy owl. Like, we can't.
They were so nice. Like,
we can't have spent all this time and had them come out for a snowy owl tour to not get a snowy owl.
They had so much fun though, even the day we didn't get it, because we did see some, horned larks and
kestrels,
gave them some info on that stuff and those birds, and they were like, we've learned so much, and they were like, we don't, it's okay that we didn't see one, and we were like, no,
it's not okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ones for sure that I feel like no matter how many times you see them, it's always a really awesome experience. Definitely one of the cool birds you can get here in Wisconsin. But yeah, since kind of our start, we've seen this thing grow, and kind of has led us to making this podcast and kind of wanting to share the stuff that we've learned and some of the knowledge from our friends and other people who are experts in the field with everybody else. So we hope that you guys all enjoy it. If you have ideas for episodes, please let us know. We always love to touch on things that people are most excited about.
Yeah. So going forward, we're going to be doing this once a week, and hopefully people enjoy it. Even if they don't, we're going to keep doing it anyway. So it's going to be around, and if you want to watch the video version, you can do it on our shorts channel. If you want to just listen to it, you can do it on the regular podcasting platforms.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed it, please leave us a review. We really appreciate that, and thanks for watching this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.